Dakar. Promoting dialogue.
Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. This is NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. ECOWAS rejects the Nigerian military junta's proposal for a 3-year duration to restore civilian rule. A combined force of the Burkinabe and Nigerian armies transport 311 trucks of goods to Niger. And more than half of Ghanaians oppose their country's participation in the military intervention to reinstate civilian governance in Niger.
But there are 3 member states, i.e. Benin, and then Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal, who to me are not democratic. So therefore, they cannot be part of a council that decides to restore democracy.
A Nigerian task force arrests over 3,000 illegal miners, including foreigners from Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
It's a settlement of miners that are more than 3,500. Most of the people there are from Zamfara State, Katsina State, Kano, Yobe. Then there are foreigners also, those from Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Tawfiq Abdul Nasser with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us, and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Liberia, and Ghana. Our top story takes us to Niger as the military junta proposes a 3-year transition of power after meeting with a delegation of the regional bloc ECOWAS. General Abdurrahman Chani, speaking on national television over the weekend, warned that any attack on the country would not be a walk in the park for those involved. The coup leader reiterated that the principles for the transitional move would be decided within 30 days at a dialogue to be hosted by the ruling military council. In his 12-minute speech, Chani claimed ECOWAS is set to attack Niger by setting up an occupying army in collaboration with a foreign army, describing the sanctions imposed by the regional bloc as illegal and inhumane. Meanwhile, many protesters on the street of Niamey said they are prepared to fight back against ECOWAS military intervention. As coup supporters rally behind the military junta, security and governance experts have expressed disappointment over rallying for Russia as the presence of France is being denounced in the country, which they described as jumping from one colonial master to another.
It's so painful and embarrassing that in the 21st century, in this era and time, Africans and African leaders are still not able to find a bearing for themselves. We're depending on one superpower after the other. Our economy is not working for us. Our solid minerals are being exploited, and we seem to be applauded. You cannot be rich and be poor at the same time. So I think as Africans, we need to come back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what sort of democracy or what sort of government do we want to have in place? Who are the partners we want to work with? We cannot be jumping from one colonial master to another. It's high time that Africans and our leaders take our destiny in our hands, ensure that our solid minerals and resources are working for the common good of the people, that we're able to build our industries, we're able to have our own political culture, and be able to have a life of ours. So neither I don't have sympathy or support for France, China, the US, or Russia. And I think that I'm worried that we're gradually returning to the era of Cold War, where superpowers are demarcating Africa and into different components and giving support and encouraging all manners of coup. So I think we need to ask ourselves this critical question. What do we need to do? I think the world needs Africa more than Africa needs the world. So we need to go back to that drawing board and ensure that we have our put together and we're speaking strongly as a continent. Our resources is working for us. We have a currency that is going to count. We have an economy that is working. And above all, we have a political leadership that can speak and make Africa the centerpiece of all of our conversations.
Gad Shamaki Peters is a regional and security expert. Now, and the latest update to reach our newsroom indicates that the Economic Community of West African State rejects the 3-year transitional plan by the junta in Niger. The Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security at the ECOWAS Commission, Abdel Fattah Musa, in an interview with international media, described the plan as unacceptable. Musa stressed that this proposal is nothing but a smokescreen for dialogue and diplomacy. The Commissioner warned that the sooner the military restore constitutional order and focus on their primary responsibilities, which is to defend their territorial integrity, the better it will be for them. Recall ECOWAS regional defense chiefs last week agreed on military intervention in Niger to remove the coup leaders and reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum. However, the date of the deployment is unannounced. Since July 26, the National Council for the Protection of the Homeland, led by General Abdurrahman Chani, has detained President Bazoum and members of his family. Amidst the prevailing uncertainty caused by the crisis in Niger, the Belgian authorities have taken action to evacuate 130 citizens from the country. Hadja Lahabib, the foreign minister of Belgium, revealed that a collective sum of 240 individuals, including Belgian citizens and individuals from European Union member states who expressed interest to depart Niger, have been safely evacuated up to this point. Ogeobi Erika with more details.
A Belgian Air Force A400M transport aircraft executed multiple flights between Niamey, Niger's capital, and Libreville, the capital of Gabon, before eventually landing at Melsbrook Air Base near Brussels. In total, 240 individuals of Belgian nationality, as well as from European Union member countries who sought to depart Niger, have been successfully evacuated up to the present moment. Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum was ousted from power on July 26 following a maneuver orchestrated by General Abdurrahman Chiani, the former head of the Presidential Guard. In a new diplomatic endeavor aimed at resolving the crisis, a delegation from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, engaged with President Bazoum in Niamey on Saturday. In response to the evolving situation, ECOWAS recently took the decision to activate its intervention force in preparation for a potential military intervention aimed at reinstating constitutional order in Niger. Regarding the transitional period, General Chiani declared that it would not exceed 3 years. He issued a caution that any attempt to attack the nation would not be a straightforward endeavor for those involved.
Ogeobi Erika reporting there.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
Let's now take you to Ghana, where a two-day poll conducted by reputable research firm Global Info Analytics reveals 52% of Ghanaians oppose the country taking part in a military action to restore democracy in Niger. The research conducted between August 18 and 19 also found that nearly 76% of Ghanaians share the view that coups in Africa have been occasioned by bad governance in those countries. As Atiwin Mbilolosin in Accra reports, security experts argued some members of the ECOWAS Council, including Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, do not have the moral right to demand democracy in Niger when they have not practiced it themselves.
Conducted across all 16 regions of Ghana, the poll encompassed more than 1,500 respondents. Research findings unveiled that 49% of Ghanaians hold the perspective that coups do not offer a lasting solution to addressing poor governance. In contrast, 43% hold a differing view, while 8% remain undecided. The Niger coup has emerged as a significant topic of discussion in Ghana, largely due to its repercussions on border closures affecting agricultural enterprises and the security implications for the surrounding sub-region. In addition, the The recent meetings of ECOWAS Chiefs of Defense Staff held in Accra generated considerable attention from security experts, including Colonel retired Festus Abuaji. He asserted that ECOWAS lacks the moral authority to intervene in Niger.
But there are three member states, i.e. Benin, and then Côte d'Ivoire, and Senegal, who to me are not democratic. So therefore, they cannot be part of a council that decides to restore democracy when they have either been undemocratic or have demonstrated non-democratic credentials. There are hands in the ECOWAS Council that are not clean. All the noise about where are we going to find the resources? It's not about who have the money or who find the money. We need to know where the money is coming from.
Transitioning to the ongoing deliberations about Ghana's potential involvement in the ECOWAS military intervention in Niger and the need for parliamentary approval, Kojo Nkrumah, Ghana's information minister, stated that informing Parliament is merely a matter of courtesy rather than a legal obligation.
You do not require prior approval, but the decent thing to do, the important thing to do is to engage Parliament first so that you do full disclosures to Parliament about why you are, a part of this enterprise, what the risks are, how you are mitigating them.
Reporting for NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin in Bila Lawson in Accra.
A combined force of the Burkinabe and Nigerian army escorted a convoy of trucks transporting diverse commodities. These trucks, according to media reports, journeyed from Dori in the northern region of Burkina Faso to Niamey. The report disclosed that a grand total of 311 trucks laden with a wide array of merchandise were successfully transported to support Nigerian populace. As Francis Boniface reports, these trucks had previously been stranded for nearly 2 months in Kaya, located in the central northern part of Burkina Faso.
As reported by the national television station Tele Sahel, a convoy of trucks was transported by the Burkinabe army to Dori, where Nigerian forces joined the collaborative effort. This operation, as highlighted on television, exhibited a substantial commitment in terms of logistical and human resources. The RTN, Radio Television du Niger, also indicated that this convoy was coordinated to travel from Dori in Burkina Faso to Terra in Niger, under the joint decision of the military leadership of both nations. Recalling events from the previous week, it's noteworthy that Burkinabe authorities granted exceptional authorization for the resumption of cereal exports to Niger. While various Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS member countries suspended trade with Niger, in adherence to sanctions against the junta, Burkina Faso uniquely authorized the lifting of cereal export suspension on August 11th. In an interview with the Russian news agency Sputnik, the Burkinabe defense minister expressed readiness to provide support to Niger in the face of potential military intervention by ECOWAS. On the preceding day, Niger's national television reported the deployment of air resources made available to the new authorities following the coup on July 26, involving both Bamako and Ouagadougou.
Francis Boniface filed that report. Now, over 3,000 illegal miners, including foreigners from Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have been arrested in Taraba State, northeastern Nigeria. The state government had set up a task force for the purpose, following reports of wanton destruction to the environment and acts of economic sabotage by the activities of the miners, who are reported to be moving about with illegal firearms to scare off locals who attempt to stop them. From Abuja, WADR's Osman Umar reports.
Situated in the northeastern region of Nigeria, Taraba State stands out as one of the nation's most affluent states in terms of its abundant natural resources. The state is also blessed with some of the most undulating, beautiful landscapes in the country. But all of these are being threatened by the activities of illegal miners who rummage through the forest, felling trees indiscriminately and causing damage to the land. Consequently, the state government set up a task force on illegal mining and deforestation to tackle the menace. In a single raid, the chairman of the task force reports that over 3,000 of the unlicensed miners were arrested.
It's a settlement of miners that are more than 3,500. Most of the people there are from Zamfara State, Katsina State, Kano, Yobe, Damaturu, and other parts of the state. Then there are foreigners also, those from Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Niger. When we went there, they are all sleeping. So we cordoned off the place.
The chairman, however, explains that the aim of the task force is not to drive away potential investors from the state, but rather urged all interested in mining in the state to obtain a license.
We are not stopping investors from coming to Taraba State. We are not stopping anybody that has legal documents from coming to invest in terms of mining, in terms of anything in Taraba. But one thing you should understand that investment can only take place under a conducive atmosphere. What we are saying, the legal miners, there is going to be a guideline from the state which should be followed rigidly.
The arrested illegal miners who are Nigerians have been handed over to the police, while the foreigners were handed over to the Nigeria Immigration Service for further investigation and possible prosecution. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
You're listening to NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. ECOWAS rejects the Nigerian military junta's proposal for a 3-year duration to restore civilian rule. A combined force of the Burkinabe and Nigerian army transports 311 trucks of goods to Niger. More than half of Ghanaians oppose their country's participation in military intervention to reinstate civilian governance in Niger. And Nigerian task force arrest over 3,000 illegal miners, including foreigners from Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Still ahead is the press review, guest interview, and sports update. Stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
ECOWAS Special Representative to Liberia, Josephine Nkrumah, is warning political actors to refrain from divisive and incendiary politics and adhere to issue-based campaigns. Nkrumah reiterates the significance of Liberia's progress toward the upcoming October 10 elections. In light of this, she underscores the necessity for politicians to honor the principles outlined in the Farmington Declaration, which advocates for the conduct of peaceful elections. WADR's Darlington Popper in Monrovia has more.
During Liberia's commemoration of 20 years of uninterrupted peace, the ECOWAS representative conveyed a message urging politicians and their followers to refrain from spreading violence and hate. The envoy also underscored the ECOWAS dedication to collaborating with Liberia to guarantee a fair, transparent election, while acknowledging the Liberian people's steadfast commitment to maintaining the national harmony.
In this regard, I urge political parties to uphold the letter and spirit of the Farmington River Declaration as we head for elections by demonstrable actions of leaders and partisans that guides our youth to shun all forms of violence and provocation.
Shifting the focus, European Union Ambassador to Liberia, Laurent Didahos, emphasized the imperative for all Liberians to collaborate in order to preserve the nation's peaceful state. He further restated the EU's unwavering backing for Liberia, both during and after the forthcoming October 10 elections.
I am full of trust that this electoral campaign will go well, that the peace will be kept, that candidates will accept the result of the election, and that your country can make in the future great strides towards more development, more peace, and more freedom. You don't want violence.
In parallel, President George Weah showed the global community of his administration's utmost effort to ensure a tranquil electoral process in October.
We are peacemakers. We are doing our best to have a free, fair, and transparent election. The peace is our peace. We got to maintain it. I told you, Liberian people, you are family, interrelated. Everything that happened to all of us.
However, there is a prevailing concern among local and international organizations regarding the precariousness of the nation's peace as the October 10 polls draw closer. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Usman Omar in Abuja joins us now with the major headlines from the Nigerian dailies.
Now, today, of course, being Monday, the 21st day of the month of August 2023, is a very big day for Nigeria and Nigerians because today, the much expected minister nominees, that is the minister designates, are going to be inaugurated to take over the various ministries, which will imply the start of governance proper in the country since the coming on board of this new administration by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We have the Sun Daily newspaper is leading with this story saying Abuja agog as ministers take oath of office. With a rider, ex-Ebonyi governor will do Nigeria proud as works minister, says Akpabio. Akpabio is the Senate president. Civil society organizations, others kick against ex-governors collecting multiple benefits. SERAP, for example, that is Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, is actually calling on the president to stop the salaries of former governors. All Nigerian governors, former Nigerian governors, are on lifetime pension. And now some of them are now coming back again as ministers. And what has been happening in the country is that even as ministers, they take their salaries as ministers and they still continue to draw resources from their various states in the name of pension. So these civil society organizations led by SERAP, that is Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, are calling on the president to stop the salaries of former governors in the face of dwindling resources of the nation. But the Punch newspaper is leading also with a story on federal government prioritizes economy security as ministers take oath of office. With a rider, President's 8th point agenda to guide appointments, ministers complete documentation at the Secretary to the Government of the Federation's office. Tinubu renames Environment Ministry, appoints Niger Delta Minister, reassigns Oyetola others. Yes, yesterday there was a minor reshuffle to the earlier list of minister designates that was released. So this seems to be the story on virtually all the newspapers, major newspapers in Nigeria today. But of course, Vanguard newspaper is leading differently with the story on the situation in Niger. It says, Niger, ECOWAS reject junta's 3-year transition plan. With a rider, junta warns against foreign interventions. Talks between ECOWAS junta yield little result. This is according to an official. And another rider says deep division exists within presidential guard. Notes majority of soldiers at presidential complex will flee if ECOWAS attacks. Pope calls for peace in coup-hit Niger. And on this note, we come to the end of the press review segment for today with me, Usman Umar, and it's back to you in the studios.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest interview this afternoon takes us back to Niger, where the military junta proposes a 3-year transition of power after meeting with a delegation of the regional bloc, ECOWAS. General Abdurrahman Chani, speaking on national television over the weekend, warned that any attack on the country would not be a walk in the park for those involved. The coup leader reiterated that the principles for the transitional move would be decided within 30 days at a dialogue to be hosted by the ruling military council. Does this proposal from the junta indicate he is there to stay for a longer period? What implications might that have on the country, given the intention of the regional bloc to use military intervention in restoring civilian rule if persuasion fails? Giving insight into these questions is Gad Shamaki Peters, a regional security and governance expert.
It's encouraging to see that ECOWAS is having conversation with the juntas and the military leaders in Niger. This was exactly what we had advocated for because the region is not ready for any full-blown war or military intervention in Niger, intervention of ECOWAS, whatever name we want to call it. So I think this opens up space for dialogue, opens space for more interaction from return to civilian rules or an exit for the president that was forcefully removed from office by the military. So I think it just give room for this escalation of the crisis and provide opportunity for all manners of intervention that will probably lead to a peaceful resolution of the incidents in Niger.
Right. So now we've not had any feedback from the regional bloc, ECOWAS, and the military junta in Niger has already made a statement asking for 3 years for the transitional rule. Does that signal that he's not ready to leave power now, just as ECOWAS wanted to be done?
Well, from the very moment that they took over power, their actions and inaction clearly indicated that they were there to sit for a while. You remember at the peak of all of the effort to ask them, giving them 7 days, asking them to return the civilian rule, they went ahead to appoint the prime minister, went ahead to appoint ministers, and you can see a mix of military and civilian. So it means that they mean business. And whatever conversation that ECOWAS will be having with them, in my mind, is how to exit the former president out of the country or from his detention and make some arrangement for a gradual shift to civilian rule. But I don't see any major decision by the military to step out of power or to hand over to the former president. I'm not sure that will happen, and I'm not sure that is on the agenda. So I think ECOWAS too needed to have made a quick statement. But again, the agenda seem to be quite ahead at most often in their reaction and being proactive in their response to some of these interventions. So I think they're just being forward-looking instead of waiting for ECOWAS to dictate anything for them.
Right. From all indications, the military junta is obviously not ready to step down, just like you also cited in your earlier submission. And the ECOWAS chiefs of staff during their meeting also reiterated readiness to carry out their initial plan if persuasion fails. So what kind of situation do you think that might create in the country?
Well, if I'm not missing my history, I don't think ECOWAS on its own will go into a full-blown war with any country without going to the EU. The EU on their own will not give that authority without going to authorization, without going to the UN. In the UN, you need the 5 major superpower to give their votes. I can tell you for free that China and Russia will not support any military in Niger. And so if China and Russia do not give their vote, it means that it's not going to happen. And so looking at the economy implication, do we have the resources at ECOWAS to even supply equipment and aid to the military? Do we have the capacity to sustain a full-blown war in Niger? The 7 states bordering Niger from Nigeria, the governors, the senator, and traditional religious leaders have spoken loudly that they are not going to support any military intervention from ECOWAS against the junta in Niger. So I think for me, looking at the historical and cultural relationship, religion, and a number of other things, I think there won't be any military use of force by ECOWAS.
Gad Shamaki Pichas is a regional and security and governance expert. And in sports, Spain have been crowned the champions of the FIFA Women's World Cup after their deserved 1-0 against England in the final on Sunday. First half goal scored by Captain Olga Carmona was enough to help the Spaniards take home the coveted trophy, and that's it for sports. We have come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM, Numi FM 94.0 Banjul, and Veritas Radio 102.9, and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. We also thank our listeners in Ghana on Radio Part 95.1 Savannah region and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Inyas Bilimo has been on the console. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I'm Tawfiq Abdul Nasir. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio
94.9